Hello and welcome to the first in a series of gardening videos produced by the Medina County Herb Society. Tonight we're going to be talking about starting seeds, and the seeds that we're going to be starting are parsley seeds, because parsley is the 2021 International Herb of the Year, and Kate will be discussing parsley. Thanks, Kate.
There's several different kinds of parsley: the flat-leaved kind, the curled line, and root parsley. And there are some crosses like Parsley in seed catalogs, and you may have seen them, which is a cross between parsley and celery. There's several of them. Most of them are biennial. It doesn't matter what kind. Parsley grows the first season as a rosette and then blooms the second season. It blooms kind of early. If you keep the bloom cut off, you can keep it alive a little longer, but it's better to start some every year so you have some on the first year and some on the second year. Anyway, there's an old saying, parsley takes a long time to germinate. And there's an old saying that it goes down to the devil and back up again before it germinates. Anyway, so this is a good time to start it because it can take 2 to 3 weeks before it germinates. And so you don't want to wait till the last minute or it'll be teeny tiny. The parsley is easy to grow. There is a little bit of problem with groundhogs and aphids, but most times they don't bother outdoors. Use sterile soil to start it so that you don't have to fight any diseases inside. Inside is warm and sort of the perfect environment, and so you want the plants to have an advantage over anything that might come with the soil. But she's going to talk about that.
To start sowing parsley, we're going to use same techniques that you would use to sow any seeds indoors, for indoors growing that you would later transplant to the garden. You need some materials to get started, so you want to gather these beforehand. You're going to need, as Kate said, sterile soil, which I have here in a bag, and I have pre-moistened it so it's easy to work with. You'll want to do that too. You also need a container. Besides the soil, you need a container to put your plants in. If you're a brand new gardener, the easiest way to do it is just simply buy a commercially prepared kit. You can buy squares or rectangles that can hold your pots or hold cells, and they often come with a little convenient greenhouse lid. If you'd like to be a little more adventuresome, you can use homemade recycled newspaper pots in different shapes, or you can put all those toilet tissue tubes that you've been trying to figure out what to do with. You can make individual little pots out of those also. And in a further video, we'll show you how to construct some of these things. Right now, we're just going to focus on the growing. So what I'm going to do is take, in this case, a little cardboard, commercially prepared, so you know it's been sterilized, so you don't have to worry about any infection. So we're going to fill that with soil, and if you notice, I'm tamping it down. You don't want to just lay it in there, you want to push it down. What I pre-moistened is commercially prepared, sterile seed starting mix. That's what you want to use, not potting mix, seed starting mix. And the reason is, when you purchase it, you're going to find out that, notice that it'll have all different types of textures in it, different materials, which we'll talk about at another time. What you need to know now is that this is the ideal medium for growing starting seeds. It has nutrients in it also, so this is what I would recommend that you start with. Now I have my little flat here of cells filled. I pushed down the soil, and now I'm ready to sow the parsley in each one of these. And notice I didn't fill them totally to the top. So now we have our prepared medium in a sterile container. We have two kinds of parsley we can sow today that you'll find readily available. One is the curly-leaved, which is often used in restaurants on the plate as a decorative item, but it's also very good to chew to clean your teeth after a meal. The other is a flat leaf, which typically is preferred by cooks, but they're used interchangeably, so whatever you prefer the look of. I'm going to use curly. Now, Kate, would you put your hand over here so I can show them what the size of the seed is? These are fairly small seeds. So we're going to start by sprinkling them over the top of the container. Now, the next step will be to put a little bit more of the pre-moistened soil over top. If these were very fine seeds, I wouldn't put any soil on them at all. If they were larger seeds, I'd push them further into the soil. So now I'm going to take just a little, just the smallest amount of this and sprinkle it, because I don't want to bury these too deep. The rule of thumb is that you should plant things 2 times, the depth should be 2 times the width of the seed. These were small, so we're doing just the slightest little. You could even probably just push them in the soil a little bit, which would be fine too. Okay, so now we have our, notice, you don't have to be fussy about this. Plants, seeds grow in the wild. They don't care if you're fussy or not. Now, the third thing you want to remember, besides sterile soil and sterile medium, and then we said planting appropriately for the seed size, is you need to label it. So I just always use recycled labels, and I will write on here that this is curly-leaved parsley, and very importantly, the date that I sowed it. That's information you want to keep for yourself so that next year you know how long it took you to produce seedlings. Now you could simply take this, you could put it into a big plastic bag, any kind of a plastic bag at this point, or you can cover it with saran wrap, which is another way to do it. I'm going to make sure it's moist, everything's moist, so all I need to do is seal it up, and then I put it up on top of my refrigerator. That's where I wait. And then I check every day. You won't have to water at this point because everything is thoroughly moistened, but once you take it out of the plastic bag or take off the saran wrap, which you're going to uncover when you see the first leaves germinating. So when you see the germination, it's now time to take it out of that protective covering. Now you're going to have to keep an eye on it to make sure that it doesn't dry out, because if you haven't done this in your home before, you don't know how fast the container will dry out. There are a couple good ways to water. You can either sit. Now parsley, generally, the official statement is that it takes 5 days, but all the gardeners that I know disagree with that. You have to plan on parsley taking quite a while, and it has to be at 65 degrees approximately, so it's cool. So you want to start it in a cool area. If it's too hot, they will not be successful. Every plant has its own set of requirements, and that's generally on the package. So you do want to read that. The way I'm going to water it now is I can put it in another container, and I only water from the bottom so those little fine seeds don't wash all out of the container. So I can do it like this. I let it sit until it's soaked up, and then I take it out and put it under light. And it should be 2 inches from the top of the soil to a light. You can use a grow light. Any garden store has the proper lights, especially if you don't have much good light at home. You can also, once they germinate, you can set them on a windowsill, but they will get a little bit leggy unless it's a really cool windowsill. So you'll have to experiment to see what works out for you. So if you didn't want to put it in a pan like this and soak it from the bottom, you could also use a little mister. This just happens to be a very pretty one, but you can use any kind of a squirt bottle that's clean. Because remember, we're talking about sterile materials because we don't want to introduce any germs or bacteria into the environment right now. So now let's imagine that we've sprouted. We're going to take this out of its plastic container or take the saran wrap off. So we're going to set it under a grow light, just 2 inches below the light. Then as the plants start to grow, you'll move the light up or drop the plants down so that there's always 2 inches between the top of the foliage and the light. That way you won't burn them, but they'll get the most light that possible. Temperature. I mentioned temperature at the beginning. I moistened this sterile seed starting mix with water that's on the warm side. You can even take your seeds and soak them for a few hours in warm water before you sow them. But after that point in time, you can just use cool water because remember, the plants are growing outside and rainwater is quite cold in the spring. So the only time you need to use warm water is so that you're moistening the soil because that works better. And if you want to soak the seeds. From then on, just use water out of the sink, not freezing cold, but really no concerns about temperature. When you do water, we have this one sitting in this container, and once I'm satisfied that the sides of the container are wet, the soil of course was already wet. Now you can see here there's still a little area that's a little bit dry. So I might want to just mist that a little bit. Then what you're going to be doing is taking this out of this and putting it on whatever kind of a tray you're going to be growing it on. So let's just imagine that this is also the tray. Because I do not want standing water. That will rot off the seedling roots, so no standing water. When you've taken it out from underneath the plastic coating or the little tent that you bought to go put over it, whenever you water when the soil is starting to feel dry. You don't want it to be soaking wet. That's why you drain everything. You also can't let these seedlings get really dry because remember, they're growing in the spring when it's moist outside. So if you're using any kind of a container like a plastic container to put the seeds in, you need to have holes punched in the bottom of that so it can drain. Now, after it's warm enough to put your plant outside, and you have to know whether the plant will take freezing cold or not. Parsley can be put out when it's fairly chilly outside, but the seed packets will give you directions on that. So when you're ready to plant the parsley, we are not going to transplant it to a bigger pot. We are going to tear these little pots apart and just put one in each hole down the row or however you've designed your garden. So again, parsley gets a root, a nice deep thick root, and you don't want to disturb that. Other plants are not so fussy, so gardening is an ongoing learning experience, and I hope you have great fun with it. Be brave. Try the simple commercial approach first with the mix and the commercially prepared packets and containers. You can even buy commercially prepared little peat pots that you soak in water instead of planting in this type of a container. Just have fun. And we'll discuss in a later video some other approaches and some other seeds and best ways to plant those. But this parsley is the first thing you want to sow. indoors, so that's why we're doing parsley today. And then we have someone else from our team that would like to speak for a minute. As a nonprofit group, the Medina County Herb Society supports many different community efforts, including a scholarship. If you would like to help us support those activities in your community, I'm going to have Sandy come to the mic so she can explain ways that you can participate in that.
We are hoping to have our annual plant sale again this year. This year it will be in the Medina Community Gardens and Educational Center, downtown Medina, with lots of room to spread out. You will have to mask up. It is scheduled for May 8th, Saturday, late morning at this point, for several hours. We will also be raiding our libraries and have a selection of books and accessories available that day. We hope to have healthy basic herbs and also some of the more unusual ones. We're always looking for new varieties, for instance, slow bolting basils and lavenders that survive the winter here in Ohio. So we try to have things available you won't find at the big box stores. We are exploring having a pre-sale period, April 24th to April 30th, and you could use Venmo to prepay and pick up with carside delivery if you choose not to shop the sale within the garden. You can find us to keep up with current plans on Facebook at the Medina County Herb Society and the Medina Community Garden and Education Center also, or Facebook page where you can find current information. You'll find more when it gets closer to sale day. But so far, everything has been approved for 2021, which we're very happy about.
If you enjoyed this, please follow us on Facebook at Medina County Herb Society for more upcoming videos in the